The Conservatives are trying to play a political game right now, but it's a very dangerous game they are playing because they are trying to use their extraordinary powers for their own partisan pursuits. And I don't think any of your viewers want to live in a country where parliamentarians are directing police or the Auditor General for their own partisan gains. That is an extremely dangerous precedent.
That was Liberal House Leader Karina Gould in conversation with our chief political correspondent Vassy Kapelos in an interview for CTV's Question Period this Sunday. Now, at the heart of the matter is the now defunct Sustainable Development Technology Canada. The program was supposed to help Canadian companies develop green projects with hundreds of millions of dollars. The Auditor General found 1/6 of the projects weren't eligible for the funding they got. The Speaker of the House says the government hasn't followed a House order to hand over documents related to the program to the RCMP. And the opposition says that's a problem. Is this just another symptom of a dysfunctional House of Commons, or is the government trying to avoid accountability? Let's bring in the front bench. Sabrina Grover was a federal Liberal candidate in the 2021 election. She's senior advisor at Spark Advocacy and North Star Public Affairs. Gary Keller is vice president at Strategy Corp. He held key roles in the Conservative government of Stephen Harper. And former Ontario NDP MPP Gurdatin Singh, he's now vice president at Crestview Strategy. He's also the brother of federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. Thank you to everyone for being here. Gary, I want to start with you on this one. How serious is this in your mind?
Well, it's serious enough that the House of Commons Speaker has ordered these documents to be produced. And this isn't the first time the Liberal government has gotten into trouble. If you recall, back before the last election, Anthony Rota, when he was the House of Commons Speaker, he demanded that the government produce documents related to what was going on in Winnipeg with regards to the sending of certain diseases abroad by somebody who was later found to be involved with the Chinese government. When an election happens, though, all those orders cease to exist due to parliamentary rules. The problem the government has is Parliament is ready and willing to use its powers, and the opposition parties are willing to use the House of Commons to force those documents to be produced. The House of Commons Speaker really has a very narrow set of rules that he has to follow, and it's pretty clear what the rule book says. And the problem for the Liberals is, until this matter is resolved, all other House of Commons business can continue. So the government can't pursue its agenda. And I've seen this again and again with this government, where they tend to mismanage the legislative agenda, and it hurts them in the end because they can't get their own legislation passed. So yes, Parliament and the House of Commons is flexing its muscles a bit here. They have the right to do so. And, I heard Karina Gould say, ordering the Auditor General. Look, the Public Accounts Committee in the House of Commons has ordered the Auditor General to do certain things many times over the years by motion and by all parties. So I'm sorry, that argument doesn't hunt for me.
Yeah, and Sabrina, Karina Gould has said that Conservatives are just basically playing political games here. But on the flip side, why not just hand over the documents at this point?
I think it's certainly an interesting question, and I think it's going to come down to, this is both a political game, but it's also a procedural and policy game. And I think that the thing that Karina Gould continues to point out is that where are these documents going? Are the Conservatives just trying to use this for their own personal gain, for fundraising emails, for promoting their own political agenda? Because you can't really be directing the House to strike an investigation. The RCMP has already said that they are investigating these processes. If the RCMP would like to request the documents, they can certainly do that. And documents produced in the House and that go to the Conservative Party are not going to be eligible to be used in an investigation either, right? So I think it's a question about, is the motivation for this actually accountability? And if it's accountability, then should we have the RCMP be requesting these documents and have that process underway? Or if it's just for political gain, then I think that the Liberals are right to be able to stand up and, decry when the powers of the House are being misused and decry whether or not this is actually part of parliamentary privilege. And I think it'll be interesting to see how Greg Fergus rules on that.
Yeah, and Gurdatin, you have to wonder whether or not any of this really matters, because the RCMP did tell MPs this summer that they likely won't be able to use those documents as part of their investigation. So do you feel like it's a bit of a moot point?
Whether it's a moot point or not, we know that this is a Liberal government that has their back against the wall, a Liberal government that is continually having to be on the defensive with attack and attack over and over again. And this just seems like an issue that is once again going to derail their agenda. And there's a really easy solution. Just release information. What are they hiding? And why are they putting up all these walls towards this information being brought forward? It's a bad look for the Liberal government. It adds to this already often criticisms of either their lack of ability to manage issues or their lack of transparency, and frankly feeds into narratives around their inability to govern effectively. And I think there's just an easy solution. Let the information be brought forward and then let matters move forward accordingly.
Gary, to Gerritsen's point, is this kind of an own goal where they could have just solved this by handing over the documents? Or does it speak more to the tone of Parliament ever since it resumed 3 weeks ago, which I think we can all agree has not been exactly harmonious?
No, it certainly hasn't. And, everybody's elbows are up as we are in this time period where everybody can feel an election is coming and everybody can sense it, but nobody wants to be the first person to pull the trigger on an election campaign. And it's only going to get worse from here on in. Look, House of Commons privilege and procedure is pretty a slam dunk on this one, where the government will be asked to produce the documents. In the last case, they were threatening and suing Anthony Rota and taking him to court to prevent the documents to be released. And I expect they probably will follow that same path here. And so to Gerritsen's point as well, if you have nothing to hide, why not just release the documents, get it out of the way? I mean, this is the SDTC. This was an organization which the ethics commissioner had found people had committed blatant conflict of interest and voting on sending money to companies of which they were own shareholders. There's a blatant, open and shut, walking, talking conflict of interest. And again, not producing the documents does make it look like they have something to hide.
Yeah, and Sabrina, you would think that the Liberals might be able to turn the page on this pretty quickly, even though, as you suggested, that perhaps this could be used by the Conservatives in fundraising. But I wanted to go back to something that Melanie Paradzi had said a couple of weeks ago. She suggested that maybe Gould could, and the Liberals could look at prorogation. I mean, Karina Gould has pushed back on that on this very show. But how do we get things back on track here to avoid things being, all the procedures and all of the House business from being stalled as it is right now?
I think it's really interesting because when you get into these parliamentary dates and like House procedure and all of these kinds of conversations, I think Canadians sometimes tend to tune out as well because it becomes so inside baseball. And I think similar to what happened last December, where the Conservatives derailed parliamentary process again and prevented House processing from going through that point. Like if the Liberals were to play this smart and were to play it politically well, they could put the blame back on the Conservatives in saying that, they are the party that's actually blocking conversations that matter to Canadians. And so I'll wait to see if that actually happens and to see how they end up playing that from a political standpoint. I think it's hard to get things back on track in terms of where the tone and attitude is of Parliament right now. It feels very chaotic, but it also feels very tension-filled. And it doesn't feel like there's that motivation to get things back on track. Could they prorogue? I think it wouldn't happen until after the fall economic statement. And so I think that if they were to do that, they really need a strong fall economic statement to set an agenda coming back into session in 2025.
Gerritsen, I'll give you the last 30 seconds here.
I'll just say this. The Liberals are not in a position right now where their narrative is anything other than their ability to try to present themselves as a viable governing party to the people of Canada. Anything but that continues to weaken them in an already incredibly weak position. The Liberals from the get-go should have just released information, let this matter go forward, and they should be trying as hard as they can to try to win back the confidence of Canadians, something that is at an all-time low.